live any minute now. Let's see. There we are. Okay, and remember, if you have your YouTube open, please hit the mute button so that they don't.
Yeah, I don't have it open.
Okay, and we should have people jumping in here any
Should
minute.
be live any minute now.
Turn that down. Okay. One watching so far. It takes a little while to get in, and I'm just going to let you know we're probably going to have about 50, 60 people in here, but by tomorrow night we'll have watched, there'll be about 1,000 or 1,500 people that have watched it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's great.
And I can't wait for people to find out how to get a hold of you, because I think what you have to offer is so awesome.
Thank you.
In meeting. Hey guys, y'all say hello. I see a few people are in here. Y'all say hello so we can say hello back. Hey, Michelle. Prompt, Miss Prompt right there. Universal Intuition. Hi, how are you? It's good to see you. I went and looked at your channel the other day. I think I might have subscribed too. If I didn't, I meant to, so I'll go back and do that. I'm going to go ahead. We've only had a couple people say hi, but we have more than that in the room. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce you, Brian. This is Brian Smith. And just real quick, I'm just going to tell you that I had a situation that spurred my spiritual growth whenever I realized that somebody that was already deceased, there was something that had happened and I couldn't make it right. And so I started looking at NDEs and I went to see a medium, and it just kind of spurred my spiritual growth because it like popped my mind wide open. And I was watching another channel called We Don't Die Radio, and I saw this guy, Brian Smith, talk. And my heart was just, again, pumped wide open because he has a great story to tell, and he's taken devastation and turned it into something beautiful. So Brian, with that, Brian Smith from Grief to Growth, and that's GRIEF, the number 2 and growth. Mm-hmm. Brian, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing here.
Okay, sure. Well, I guess we'll start at the beginning. I grew up as a Christian fundamentalist. My grandfather was actually a Pentecostal pastor, and I grew up in his church. So I was taught from a very early age that as a child, even, that I was damaged goods. I was created with this thing called original sin because Adam had sinned, and therefore I was separated from God. And all I had to do was to turn to Jesus, and Jesus would save me. But there's always this weird thing to me that Jesus had to save me from God. So I always loved Jesus, but God I wasn't really, a big fan of, because right. Jesus was my protector. Right. So I go through, my life with this, and I got saved at the age of 13. I was baptized. I begged to be baptized before that. My parents wouldn't let me. They said I wasn't ready, but I thought I was going to hell. So I was really, ready to do this. So I did get baptized, spoke in tongues, received the Holy Spirit, the whole thing. But I always felt like I was kind of faking it, and I knew God would know that. If God knows my heart, God knows that I tried to be a good person, all those things, but I just could not love this God that was going to condemn so many people. And even if he was going to save me, if he's going to condemn all the people around me, that really bothered me. So this went on for a long time. I was about 40 years old when I really had a real crisis of just my spirit, my faith, and everything. This was just about the time I started getting on the internet, and I found something called Christian universalism, which was a belief that Jesus' death was sufficient for everyone, whether you accepted it or not. So that made me feel better about this whole thing, that, Jesus died for everyone and not just for me or the people that had accepted him. So I felt a little bit better. I went to a counselor, got over all the panic attacks and everything I was having. But this also prompted me, outside of just accepting that, to really study the Bible and where it came from, and understand the history of it, the politics of it, and all that. So I thought I had a pretty good understanding. But being the engineer that I am, and being a very analytical person, I want to know, well, how does this stuff work? And so I start looking into NDEs, as you and I talked about a little bit earlier. And one of the first books I read was actually a book by Dr. Gary Schwartz, which is a book on mediumship, where he
Yes.
actually scientifically studied these mediums and proved that they were actually getting information that they could get in no other explainable way. So I'm going through, my life, and this was, I guess, when I was probably in my mid 40s or so. I have two beautiful daughters. I'm married to my wife now for it'll be 30 years this year, and
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
So I'm feeling, like I'm feeling pretty decent about, my relationship with God, and I'm feeling, pretty good about my spirituality. Studied NDE, studied mediumship, afterlife communications, all this stuff. So I feel like I really understood it pretty well. And my 15-year-old daughter, Shayna, in 2015, um, just passed away. She was a healthy girl. She was a national level basketball player. She'd been to a couple of national basketball tournaments. She had switched to volleyball the year before. Her first year, she made a national touring team. She was at a volleyball tournament the week before she passed. She was down in Orlando, Florida. We live in Ohio. She came back, and she came back on a Saturday. And on Wednesday, we went to wake her up, and she just didn't wake up.
She was
Um, yeah, she was gone. So Shayna had she had a heart condition, which we were aware of. We were seeing a cardiologist, but it was a very mild condition, and it had been treated. She was on no medication. As I said, she was all clear for sports. But there was an incident with her heart. And the interesting thing is, a lot of people have asked me like what happened and and the fact is, frankly, I don't know.
don't know.
The coroner came back and said that she had a birth defect, something that was congenital, but the cardiologist hadn't found it. And we were going to one of the best cardiologists in the country at Children's Hospital here in Cincinnati. And when we talked to him, even after she had passed, he said, this should not have killed her. And even if I had known she had this, I wouldn't have treated it because it shouldn't be that dangerous. And if anything, it should have manifested during exercise. And the reason I tell you all these details is a lot of times people they spend a lot of time wondering why, what happened, what could I have done differently? And I've just let go of the whys. So when people ask me like what happened, the thing is I don't know. Now I have seen mediums since Shayna's passed and Shayna has come through. And it's interesting. They hardly ever can get her cause of death. She doesn't really talk about it. And what she has said to me is that this is the way it had to be, that this was planned from the beginning. And I believe that it was planned. So I don't spend a lot of time wondering why. I'd spend time wondering, what do I do now? So the good thing is because even though I had this fear of death, this thanatophobia, I mean, I had it bad to the point where it caused me panic attacks and everything. I had pretty much gotten over that. And I thought it was preparing me because I always thought I was going to die early. I always had this feeling that I was not going to live to 25. And when I hit 25, I was surprised I was still here. But with Shayna passing at 15, I'm thinking now as I look back on my life, maybe this was preparing me for her passing because the one blessing is that I never wondered where Shayna was. I looked at her after she had passed, left her body, is she's left her body. She hasn't died. I don't use the word died. I don't use the word dead. There is no death. And we were taught, again in Sunday school, that after our bodies expire, we sleep until Jesus comes back. That's not true. We don't miss a beat. We don't even lose consciousness. It's like we're here and then we're there. And so I believe that Shayna's on the other side. So shortly after Shayna passed, then just things started going crazy with synchronicities. Someone told me to write to a guy named Mark Ireland, and I wrote to Mark Ireland. He wrote me back, and he sent me a couple of his books that he written because his son Brandon had passed away. And through Mark Ireland, I met a woman named Elizabeth Blasson. Elizabeth's son had passed away, and she started an organization called Helping Parents Heal. So and this is just crazy, but my wife and I planned a vacation to Phoenix, which we had never been to before, because my older daughter said, I don't want to go to the beach this year because we always went to the beach with the girls. Let's go to the opposite. Let's go to the desert. So we go to the desert, we go to Phoenix, and that happens to be where Elizabeth lives.
Wow.
So she's like, well, you're like half an hour from me. So why don't we get together and have breakfast? So I met her. A couple of Helping Parents Heal board members decided to start working with Helping Parents Heal as a chapter leader. My wife and I started a chapter here in Cincinnati. I'm going to fast forward a long way. Ended up starting the online group for Helping Parents Heal, which is about 6,000 members now. I met a guy named Dr. Mark Pitstick, so I started working with him on a project called the Soul Phone. So I'm a volunteer with the Soul Phone Project. You said you saw me on Sandra Champlain's show.
Yeah.
One of the first podcasts I found after Shayna passed was We Don't Die, which saved my life. I mean, literally, I listened to every episode. I listened to it every day. She put out a video, or not a video, an audio on what grief is,
Right.
which just got me through. So after going through that for about, it's been about 3 years, I was like, okay, it's time for me to step out and start sharing the information that I have, because like I said, I've studied this for probably close to 20 years now. So started Grief to Growth, which is my business now. Started that in June of this past year, and wrote the book. So I've got a book called Grief to Growth, Planet Not Buried. And what I basically tried to do was take all the things that I know about grief and help people understand that what you're going through is normal,
Right.
that you're not crazy, especially for parents that lose children. You feel like you really like you've lost your mind.
Yeah.
And
No matter how old your child is, and no matter how old you are as a parent, you can be 80 and lose your 60-year-old kid.
yeah, it's out of order. It's not the way things are supposed to be. So it's a shock to our system, even more so than a normal death. You know, when my grandmother passed away, I mean, she was much older, and I was like, you get over it. You just naturally progress through it, and you accept that she's on the other side, and I'm going to see her again. But with your child, you have to know, where are they? How are they doing? You feel like, there's a lot of guilt that's associated with, because as a parent, you're supposed to protect your child, in all times. And the wild thing is, Shayna was in Florida the week before she passed, and I was worried about her being away. And so when she gets off the airplane on Saturday and I see her, I'm like, okay, great. Now she's safe. She's back, she's back in my house. And then she passes away literally down the hallway from me, in her sleep. So it really gives you a feeling of, you realize how little control you have over things like that. So as I said, I wrote the book, and I became a life coach. So I'm a life coach now. I help other people through grief and through other challenges with life. And I started my podcast, to share with people, again, what I know. I think it's one of the biggest problems in the world today is we've forgotten who we are.
Yeah.
People think we are an accident, that the universe is a cold, uncaring place, that there was this big bang and things just kind of start bumping around, and humans just accidentally were developed, and we have no meaning and no purpose. And because of that, I think it causes most of the problems we have in the world today. So my mission is to help people understand that you do have a purpose, that you're not an accident, that you didn't pop into existence out of nothing. The consciousness precedes everything, the conscious infuses everything, and that the people that we think are dead are not dead. They're still with us and just waiting for us to join them.
Right.
So
And
that's
I'm sorry.
no, go
Do,
ahead.
do you communicate with your daughter on a regular basis?
It's really interesting, you asked that, because I've gone through all kinds of facilitated after death communications, and I meditate every day. And I was just doing some things with some parents, actually, it was, what's today? It was last week. I was doing a meditation with with the parents, and we were doing a guided meditation to see our children, and people say that. So after it was over, the woman that led it asked me, she said, well, how was that for you? Could you connect with Shayna? I said, what I got from Shayna is, we don't have to do this. We do this all the time. My communication with Shayna is continuous. But it's not like I see her or I hear her. It's just, we commune. And everything I do is dedicated to Shayna. Everything I'm doing right now is dedicated to her. It's hard to know where my thoughts stop and hers begin. And she's come through mediums and said, I inspire your writing. She said, I'm a better writer than you are, which is arguable. We could debate about that. But she was a fantastic writer. So yeah, I do communicate with Shayna, but not in a, like I said, not in an audible type of way, not in, and she sends me signs, like, all the time. I mean, just crazy signs.
Yeah. Well, that was the other thing I was going to ask, is like, I have a lot of questions I want to ask, but while we're talking about that, when you're talking to Shayna, or when you're communing with Shayna, because a lot of people get disappointed because, like, we expect to see an apparition, or we expect to hear
Hmm.
a voice, and And I'm not saying that for me because now I've come through all that, but tell us, what is it other than that? Do you, the signs, do you get a feather? Do you get a bird? What are those things? Or what are other things you've heard about with other parents?
Yeah, that's a really great question because I remember when I was a kid in church, go back to the church thing, when people would say, God told me this or God told me that. And I thought, why is God talking to them? Because God doesn't talk to me.
Yeah.
And then I would ask them, so what do you mean God told you this or God told me that? Did you hear a voice? Did you see him? Oh, well, no, it was just kind of a thought in my own mind, and I'm like, okay, well, that's the way Shayna communicates with me.
Right.
So when people say things like, I heard this from God, I heard this from someone else, and you feel like you're missing out, just think maybe it's not the way you think that it is.
Right.
So the other thing I would say to people is trust your intuition. If you feel like you're getting a communication from your loved one, trust that it is communication from your loved one. They can impress thoughts on us. And then the signs validate those things. So with Shayna, it is feathers. After Shayna passed, I said, I want our sign to be dimes, not pennies, but I want it to be dimes. I want it to be something a little bit different. So I find dimes, and I find dimes at the weirdest times in the weirdest places. And I don't know if a couple of them were apports, but like one day I was going downstairs. My wife works in the lower level of our house, and there was a dime on the basement steps. Now, there's no, I had been downstairs earlier in the day. The dime wasn't there. So I don't know how that got there. Or,
You called it an apport.
yeah, an apport.
What is that? Tell us what that
An
is.
apport is when something appears from spirit, something physically appears from spirit in a physical form. So it could be a dime, it could be a feather. The thing is, you know, I don't know how these things happen. Even though I'm an engineer and I'm always trying to figure it out, I've learned just don't question it.
Yeah.
But there was one day, she passed in June. In August, we were on vacation, and I get up early and I walk every day. So I had gotten up and I was walking, and I'm like, I have to deal with my wife and my other daughter who are grieving. We're trying to have our first vacation with our new family, and I'm like, this is going to be a rough day, Shane. I need you to give me a sign. So I'd like to find a dime, today. So we're getting on the shuttle, getting in this van to go take the shuttle across to this island. And my wife and my other daughter get in the second row of the van. I decide to get in the third row. So as I bend my head down to get back into the third row, I glance under the seat and there's a dime sitting under the seat. So it's the timing of it, when you ask for it. And I think about the fact, okay, if I hadn't gotten in the back seat, I would have never seen it. And this dime was like under the seat, like right in the middle. So it's all these things that, did she put the thought in my head to get into the back seat? Was a dime already there? Or did she put it there? I don't know. But the timing made me feel like she was really with me.
Right. And I feel like whenever we acknowledge that, I feel like when we do acknowledge it, they communicate with us more.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
kind
one
of
day I was on my walk and I listened to music when I'm on my walk and I had my phone in my pocket and the music cut off. And I'm like, okay, that's annoying. So I get my phone out, I put the music back on, I put it back in my pocket, I walk a little longer, it cuts out again. And I'm like, this is crazy. And I thought, this is Shayna. So I was just coming back toward the house. I was getting ready to cross the last street to get into our neighborhood. And I said in my mind, Shayna, if this is you, make it happen again. At that moment, it cut off for the third time.
Don't you love that?
Yeah. So, it's things like that. And it's being open to things and just kind of recognizing them. Another time I was listening to a podcast and this woman was saying that after her daughter had passed, one of the signs she would give her is people will walk up to her and say, I knew your daughter. And these are people that she didn't know. And so I'm hearing this just as I'm walking out of my house. I hear this podcast. I'm walking my loop and I'm coming, past this house and I see a woman walking out of her house down the driveway. Okay, no big deal. And she keeps walking toward me and I'm walking in the street and I'm like, she's gonna, start to talk to me. So I take my earphones out and I'm like, yeah. And she tells me her name. She says, I knew your daughter. She was in Girl Scouts with my daughter. I walk this same route like
Oh,
every day. And she'd never said this to me. This happened right after I heard someone say, this is one of the signs my daughter sends me. So again, it's these things. It's not just the event, but it's the timing and the
right,
connection that you make to, someone in spirit trying to get your attention.
right. Okay, so there's been a lot of action on the chat while we're talking.
Hmm.
And I struggle with lives because I keep wanting to go look at the chat. But so I want to ask you to tell us, and while you're talking, I'm going to be looking at the chat, so please
Hmm.
forgive me.
Oh yeah.
I want you to tell us what is the what is the worst thing, or what is the best thing, or which both, what is the worst and what is the best thing you can say to a parent who's just lost their child? My neighbor just lost her daughter yesterday. Her
Mhm.
daughter's 51, but she was at home with her mom, thank God, when she passed away. What do you say to her, um and or anybody who's grieving? What's the best thing, what's the worst thing?
Yeah, actually, I have a list of things in my book of things to say and not say to someone who's grieving. One of the things you don't want to say is things like God needed him, her, or him more than you did. God needed another angel. Um, God doesn't need our loved ones, and frankly, we're all with God all the time. So it's not like when we die, we're now suddenly we're with God and we weren't before. That's not a helpful thing to say to people, and it pits them against the object of their faith. So that's one of the worst things you can say. At least you have other children. Something that people will say: other children do not substitute for the child that has
Yeah.
passed, or anybody that's passed, whether it's a child, a husband, a grandmother, or whatever. Um, but understand that people are just trying to fill in the space. People don't know what to say, so sometimes they say really stupid things. So I encourage people to try to give that other person grace and just give them credit for at least trying to say something. Things that you want to do is focus on the person who is here, the person who is grieving. So focus on their pain. So you want to say, not I know what this is like for you, but I know this must be difficult. Um, Ask them, like, so a lot of times people say, well, what can I do for you? Especially early in the grief, people don't know. So maybe offer something tangible, like, can I watch your kids for you? Or can I prepare a meal for you? Or can I go grocery shopping for you? Something that'll remove some of the burden for them. Um, don't avoid talking about the person that passed. A lot of times people say, I don't want to talk about that person because it's going to make you sad. Understand we're thinking about them all the time anyway. You're not going to make us sad. Now, you might make us cry. You might release the emotion that we're already feeling, and that's okay. But don't avoid it, because people typically do want to talk about their loved one, and they want to know that you remember them too.
Right.
So sharing upbeat stories about the person that's passed, talking about the good times, the memories that you have, focusing on what you have as opposed to what you don't have, can be very helpful. So those types of things, can help the person that is going through the grief to give them permission to talk about that person and talk about their feelings, which most people do. They want to process it. They want to get it out.
Right.
Because, like I said, believe me, they're thinking about it, whether they're thinking about it or not.
Right. So a lot of people were saying hello when they got here, and then some of them were saying they're sorry for your loss and they give you their condolences. A couple of them said thank you for the work that you're doing, that you've taken something so tragic and turned it into something so beautiful. And one of the ladies said that we were actually talking this week about the feather. She had gotten a feather. We had talked in her reading about some passed on loved ones that seemed to be wanting to speak. And so anyway, she said whenever you talked about the dimes, it reminded her that she finds dimes all the time, and her mother was the chair for the March of
Oh
Dimes
wow.
in
Yeah.
their community.
Yeah.
So she says, wow, I just thought about that. Um, a hug is a big deal, they said. Okay, so let's talk about the dynamics in the family now. Like, okay, so you have your other daughter, and her name is
Kayla.
Kayla.
Mhm.
How do you help her move through this? How does that play out? Because I mean, I would think, I don't know, I would think that she feels maybe, or could have the potential to feel maybe some guilt that she's left and the other one went, or maybe, I don't know, anger because now Shayna's getting a lot of not attention, but
No, tension's right. Yeah.
yeah. So how does that play out when you have other children?
Yeah, that's a great question. it's a tough balancing act. And every child is different. Some general advice I would give is siblings grieve different than parents do. And believe it or not, a lot of times they don't feel like they have permission to grieve because they know how bad we're feeling. So they'll hold it in, concern for us. Um, there can sometimes parents will make their house a shrine to the child that passed, and the other child can start to feel jealous and feel like, okay, you love them more than you love me, or what about me? I'm still here. So we always have to, my wife and I always focus. Kayla was 18 when Shayna passed, and Shayna was 15. So we tried to do special things with her, like we still take family trips. I'm really feel blessed. She's 23 now. And the day after Christmas, we went to Nashville for a few days, which we had never done before. So try to create new traditions, with her. We have big pictures of Shayna up in the house. I got a tattoo with Shayna's name on it. But when I did get the tattoo, I said, Kayla, do you want me to get a tattoo with your name on it? She said, no, that would be creepy. So she didn't want that. And but before we put the pictures up in the house, we asked her, is this okay with you? Now she doesn't live here anymore. She lives about 25 minutes away. But we just asked her, are you okay with that? She didn't want ashes in the house. So we don't have an urn, but we did that out of respect for Kayla. So respect, how they want to pay homage to their loved one, to their sibling. Um, Kayla, we're very fortunate, is intuitive. She's in direct contact with Shayna.
Oh,
She
good.
doesn't like me to tell too many of her secrets, but she's extremely intuitive, and they have direct communication.
Oh,
So that's really really helpful. But we have to respect the way that she processes things. My wife and I, for example, we don't use the term died, but Kayla thinks that's just speaking plainly. So
right.
she does. We don't chastise her when she does it. It's okay. That's the way that she chooses to express it now.
Your
So
language. Yeah.
she expresses it differently than we do.
Right.
Um, but like I said, you kind of have to give them space because young people process it differently. And I was talking to her a couple days ago, and for me, I'm almost 60, so I'm looking like I'm going to see Shayna soon. So that I still have a problem with it, but I'm like, it's not going to be that
Dude,
long.
you probably have 30 or 40 years
No,
left.
don't say that. No, no, we don't say that. But I was talking to her and I was giving her my spiel about how we're going to see her again. She said, I don't want to live the rest of my life looking forward to dying. So I had to really say, okay, this is not an approach to take with her. I need to talk to her about Shayna is still with you. So uh, she had a medium reading with a really, really good friend of mine who's an excellent medium. And one of the things that she said was, I think, the most helpful to Kayla was, I know you're going to feel guilty going through these things without Shayna, having a kid, getting married, those things like that. She wanted to take a trip with Shayna when Shayna turned 18 to New York. She said, Shayna says she is with you all the time. And everything that you do, she's going to be right there with you. So when you have a kid, she'll still be an aunt. When you get married, she'll still be there with you. So when my nephew got married, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about this. My nephew got married last summer. Kayla was in the wedding. She was his best man or whatever you want to call it, but she stood next to him,
Right.
and all the kids had a picture of Shayna pinned to. She had it pinned under her dress, and all the guys had it pinned under their ties. So
Wow.
this is what makes me cry.
Yeah.
But, they all she was there, so we acknowledged her. When we walked into the reception, there was a picture of Shayna on the table, going in the reception. So she's still part of our family. So that's what we do with Kayla, to help her to adjust to it. I'm really so proud of her because she was in a medical field before. She was going to be a physician's assistant and realized that wasn't really her passion. So she decided she loves kids. So she's in mental health counseling now. She wants to work with children. And this is because since Shayna passed, she said, I want to do something that I'm really passionate about. So we've seen lots of people in our family just paying homage to Shayna in all different kinds of ways.
Right.
So we do that to help Kayla to know she's still here.
Right. Puts things into perspective the way that you're talking about it, to make sure and respect and honor that they have feelings too, and to respect the way their language, however they express it.
Yeah, I was really, really worried about Kayla because she had told us she was 18, so it was 4 or 5 years before Shayna passed, and she was an atheist, and she didn't believe in spirit or any of that kind of stuff. And so when Shayna passed, I was like, is she going to have the faith that she's going to need to get through this?
Right.
And she's never really been into church. She doesn't, she's not into that at all. But she has her own type of spirituality, and she has her, like I said, she has her own connection. So for her, it's not a matter of belief or faith. It's it's what she knows. It's what she's
It
experienced.
is. Yeah, it just is. Um, the one of the ladies said, I think commenting about you saying I'm almost 60, so I'm gonna be going soon. She says, "No, you got grandkids coming. You're gonna have to be around for them too." um, so anyway, but that's human nature, right? To want to encourage people to keep, stay here till you're 110.
I will stay here. This is an interesting thing too, because when Shayna first passed away, I couldn't think about the next day. I mean, people talk about next week or tomorrow, and it just did not compute to me. And I was like, I don't want to be here. I can't be here. I can't survive this. And I literally counted every day, and I still do on my blog, but I don't wake up every morning and think day 1,642 like I used to.
Right.
So I have gotten back into more of a normal rhythm of life, and I do feel like I have a purpose for being here. So I will be here to serve that purpose. But I have to be honest, I'm looking forward to going home. And I tell people it's like Shayna look forward to Christmas. It's going to come when it comes. It won't come before it's time, but I'm looking forward to it. And that's actually a great way to live, because I know no matter what happens, I get to go home.
Right. So here's a question. Let's talk about that for a minute. Is that because Shayna's there, or is that just because you no longer fear death and now you understand what's actually on the other side, that
It's
it
both.
really is home?
Yeah. It's both. It's obviously I got a big incentive now to see Shayna
Right.
again. Even though there are other people I want to see too, but she's got to be first.
Right.
Um, but it's also understanding that there is no death, and that being here is work. I mean, it is. It's hard work to be a human being.
Yes.
And the more I study near death experiences, and I hear these people talk, and I look into their eyes as they're explaining to me where they were, and they say, all of them say, almost every one of them says, I did not want to come back. I was forced back. And the ones that did come back, like my friend that chose to come back, came back to fulfill a purpose. So the way I look at it,
That's the pastor, Pinta,
Panagore or
yeah,
Panagore, yeah, Peter
yes.
Panagore, yeah, he's a fantastic guy. So I'm like, okay, the way I look at it is, and the other parents and I that we're in Helping Parents Heal. We were at a conference a couple of years ago, and we're sitting around. We're like, we're soldiers on a mission. So we're sitting here, we're sitting around a fire. We were in Arizona, and we're like, one day we're going to be on the other side in a bar, sitting around a fire, telling stories about what we did back here.
Yeah.
So that's the way we look at it. Like, I've got a purpose for being here. I believe this was soul planned. I believe that with all my being. I believe it's probably Shayna's idea, because that's just kind of the kind of person she is. Um, but I'm willing to stay here and do what I need to do. I need to be here for my wife and for Kayla. So yeah, I'm okay with being here, but I'm also okay with being there.
Yeah. So you said, when we get to the other side, we'll be sitting at the bar, sitting around a fire and all that other stuff. Let's talk about that. What is on the other side? And are you hearing that from Shayna? Are you hearing that from the near death experiences? Because that didn't sound like streets of gold and pearly gates.
Yeah, well, I won't out anybody, but let's just say I was talking to someone who is a lifelong Christian, and I was talking to them about death and the other side, and they're like, I don't know if I believe in it. And I'm like, seriously, you've been a Christian for like 80 plus years, and you're not really sure if you believe in it. And they're like, well, I don't like streets of gold. That sounds horrible. I don't like milk, and I don't like honey. So I don't want to go there. And I'm like, I don't think it's like that. And I think about the song Amazing Grace. There's a line that says, when we've been there 10,000 years, it's just like we've just begun singing songs. I'm like, I don't want to sing songs for 10,000 years. I think it's more freedom to do what we want. I think there's still growth. I think there's still challenges. Um, I think there are different levels, different places we can go to. So some people having near death experiences find themselves in a very physical place where they literally see flowers and streams and beaches
Ah,
and whatever. I have friends that astral travel, and there are astral cities which are just just like the cities here. I don't want to say replicas because maybe they're the real thing and we're the replica, but there's cities just like the cities we have here. And there's some people talk about I was incorporeal. I didn't have a body. I was just pure thought or pure spirit. So I think it could be anything in between all those things. And I think maybe most people when they first pass go to what's called the summer lands or the astral planes. And then you kind of migrate from there as to where you want to be. So for myself, I envision myself playing golf. I want to learn how to play the guitar, which I don't have time to do here. So the things I don't have time to do, I see myself doing those things for a while anyway, and then seeing what comes next.
Right. I know that there's been a couple of audio books I've listened to. One of them is Sylvia Brown,
Hmm.
and she talks about life on the other side, and it comes from the work that she's done with her patients. She's deceased. Dolores Cannon also deceased. Same kind of work with her patients, and that
Hmm.
they come back with these past life regression or life between life things, where they come back with these descriptions of life, like what you're talking about, like playing golf, playing the guitar, sitting around the fire, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's kind of what we want. It's a much more mental world from what I understand. So my understanding is things here we can manifest things here through thought and through emotion, but it's a slower manifestation, right? So it's a process over time. Whereas there we can manifest things, maybe even instantaneously. So I think about like the TV show, like when I was a kid, Bewitched,
I love
or I Love Genie, where you could just, you could blink and make things happen. So I
right.
think there might be an element of that to it. So what I do is after I talk to all these near death experiencers and mediums and everything, I kind of put together like a picture in my mind of like an amalgamation of I think what it might be like. And you hear all these different things. So some people will say, well, do we have bodies or not? Because some people say we do and some people say we don't. Maybe we have a choice,
Yeah.
and maybe some people want to be in a body and maybe some people decide I don't need a body anymore. And I
Right.
think maybe we have a body as long as we want it, and then we say, man, I don't feel like having a body anymore. and
Yeah.
and we can manifest in different ways. So like for example, when I cross over, I expect Shayna will probably come to me as a 15-year-old because that's what I'm most comfortable with and that's the way I see her.
Right.
And if you I don't know if you saw the movie What Dreams May Come, but
Yes.
beautiful, beautiful movie. I mean, I love it. I've watched it I don't know how many times, but his daughter comes to him as like this flight attendant. And she's beautiful because at one time he said, I saw this woman and she was a beautiful woman, but then she appears to him like his daughter again. And she can
Right.
appear in what way makes him feel comfortable.
Right.
So I think there's an element of that too.
Right. I feel like that's how they'll approach us in the way that we would recognize them. Just like I feel like God, spirit, creator, whatever anybody wants to call it, approaches us in whatever way we can understand and accept what he's or it's saying to us or trying to speak to us. I think everything is for us to be able to understand. That's,
Yeah.
I think everything's about us.
Well, it is. I mean, it's interesting because when I was a kid, I was taught again, you're just this little lowly creature. You're not the center of the universe, but in a very real way, we all are the center. We're all the center of the universe.
Yeah.
And I was talking to, I was interviewing someone the other day. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Mary Terhune, and she said, we are God. And I'm like, oh, that's going to freak a lot of people out. And
Yeah.
we are a God or we are part of God. She's like, no, we are God, and we're got like a drop is the ocean, and
Right.
but there's a Rumi quote that says, I'm not a drop in the ocean, I'm the ocean in a drop. So the inverse is also true. So when we look for this being that we call God, and this is going to freak some people out, we were taught to look outward. The
Yeah.
God's out there, the God's distance from us. Where you're going to find God is when you start to turn in.
Yes.
That's when you're going to find God.
Yes. And I don't think that'll freak anybody out on this channel. It might freak a few people out. I don't
Yeah.
know. Uh, let's see. Oh my God, I ascend to that as well. I don't ask the why. Let's see. Looking forward to flying. Misty Barrett. She's looking forward to flying through the universe. She's ready to go astral travel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so now Misty also wants to know. Hi, Jan. It's good to see you back. Let us know about your surgery. How'd that go? Um, so Missy wants to know, what are your thoughts about reincarnation?
I think reincarnation is real, but I think it's not as straightforward as we think it is. And again, this is kind of from talking to my friend Jake, who's a medium and a spiritualist, who says there is no reincarnation, and then talking to other people that say, yeah, reincarnation is absolutely real. We all live thousands of times. So the way I've kind of put those things together is I don't think it's linear. So we talk about life after life after life. Well, that's looking at time from a human perspective being on Earth. And
Right.
on the other side, time either doesn't exist or it's very different. So I think just like we can travel through space here, I think once we're outside of time, we can possibly travel through time. So first of all, these lives may be simultaneous, to use a human way of looking at it.
Right.
The other thing I think is just like I look at, like, we have like an oversoul, I guess I'd call it. So when we're here, when I'm incarnated as Brian, I'm just a small part of my true being. So it kind of sends me out as Brian. I have these experiences, I gather this knowledge, I bring it back, and then it sends out another aspect of itself that's called Barbara next time, that lives a different life, that brings that experience back to the collective. So
Right.
I think of it, it's kind of like that. And that to me kind of satisfies both. There is no reincarnation. We only live once. And there is reincarnation that we live many, many times.
Right.
So that's what I put together.
I said something to about reincarnation to my one of my siblings, and she said the Bible says man is appointed once to die or something like that. There's just no such thing as reincarnation. Get that out of your head, and all that. People
Well,
freak out about it.
first of
Uh,
all, Lazarus died more than once.
yes,
So did the girl that Jesus raised from the dead.
yes.
So those people died more than once. So that verse can't possibly be true.
Well,
Um,
the other
and
thing is that Elijah came back, and whenever the disciple says, "Well, who was it?" and he says, "Well, you saw him, but you just didn't recognize him," and then they assumed that he was talking about John the Baptist.
Jesus talks
Uh,
about reincarnation. Yeah, because people were like, they were saying, "Who's John the Baptist?" You know, and so
yes,
it's clear that the people in the biblical times believed in reincarnation. At least
yeah,
some of them did.
yes,
Um, I don't really worry about it because right now I have to live this life as Brian. So
right.
what I tell people is stop worrying about your next life or the life after that. You know, get through this life before you start thinking about what are the problems with. And I have some parents that will say, "Well, what if my son's reincarnated and when I get there, you know, he's not there. He's back on Earth." And I'm like, you're not going to get there and they're going to say, "Oh, sorry, you just missed him. He just went to Earth. He'll be back in about 70 years."
Oh, I'm
Um,
laughing, but I can see why somebody would think that because I might
yeah,
have thought that too.
yeah,
Me
and
too.
but it doesn't happen that way. I think, and when again, I've been told that when we're here, it's only a small part of it is even here. Most of us are still back on the other side. And I was listening to an interview with a guy named Richard Kelly the other day. He had a near death experience. And he goes, if you're waiting to see your Uncle Fred when you get back, you're there now. You can nudge him right now because you're there. Now we're not conscious of it while we're in these bodies, so it kind of breaks down there. But yeah, I think it's, you know, it's interesting to ponder, and whatever makes you feel comfortable. If it makes you feel comfortable thinking you're going to have multiple lives, you've had multiple lives, and if you feel like you've got some past life trauma that you need to resolve, I know people say they have that, then by all means do a past life regression and see, you know, if it works for you.
Yeah,
Uh,
y'all, that's next week. I have a psychiatrist coming on next week who practices past life regression. Do you do those?
I know I don't, and you know, and I personally just don't really have that much interest in it.
Right.
And people that do, I think that's great. Now, you know, it's funny because Shayna had this weird thing about her neck. You could not touch if you touch the front of her neck, she'd freak out. You could touch her on the back of the neck, and so you know, you kind of wonder, you know, does she have a trauma? Did she die maybe of strangulation, or was she hanged in an earlier life?
Hanged.
And I know Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia did a lot of work on past life stuff, and you know, kids that have injuries that look like the injuries from deaths of previous life, you know, birthmarks where the mark would have been. And you know, there's a book called The Boy Who Knew Too Much about a kid who says he was Lou Gehrig in a previous life. So there, I do believe there's definitely something to that. But my friend Penny, who had several near-death experiences, said that when she was having the near-death experience, sometimes she couldn't differentiate between herself and the being that she was with because the connection was that close. So she's like, maybe people are just so mixed up with these other beings that their lives kind of get intertwined. So there's lots of different ways to look at it.
Right. I have an unreal fear of needles. So I'm convinced that in some past life I was uh, executed by lethal injection or something because I'm scared to death of needles.
Yeah.
No reason for that.
Yeah, I don't rule out the possibility.
Yeah,
There might be some carryover between traumas, and some people say they'll have a regression, and they have an intense fear of water, and
right.
just seeing the fact that they drowned in their past life solves the fear. There's a
Solves-
woman, she had some really weird things. Something about she didn't like her feet being touched. There were like two or three really bizarre things that she in her life, and she did a past life regression, and she realized she had been a slave in a past life, and she had walked through the mud barefoot,
Oh,
and she was it was mirrors. She couldn't stand mirrors, and she was raped by someone as she was looking into a mirror.
oh,
So, but once
what-
she had this regression, whether the stuff really happened or not, her fear of mirrors went away. Her fear of being barefoot went away. It went away.
right,
So it worked.
right, right. So probably the reason it doesn't, uh, you're not so necessarily interested in it is because you probably don't have any hangups like that that you're worried about. Like you just keep moving forward.
Well, I don't have any of those. I have a lot of hangups. I don't have any of those type of hangups I think would be solved by a past life regression. Like I said, it's really interesting that I had a really intense fear of early death. And it was really, I mean, where I just knew that I wasn't going to live, past the
Right,
age of like 25.
right. Um, and you think that probably is from a past life thing, but then you got past that age and it was good.
Yeah, I don't know if it was from that or not. I'm just trying to think of some things that I've had. I also, yeah, I don't know. It could also be from this life because my grandfather, who was living with us at the time, went back to West Virginia for a visit and passed away suddenly in church. So when I was about 8 years old, I saw someone leave and not come back. So I knew that death could come, at any time. So it might
That's
have
weird.
been that. And I'm just a weird person. I worry about, things a lot. So,
You're
you know,
not weird.
grow,
I think we're all geared differently.
but growing up in a church, and I hate to say this, but it's true. It was always like they were always talking about death. What's going to happen when you die? You're going to go to hell. You're going to get Jesus is coming back at any moment. So I literally thought, even if I did live, Jesus is coming back any moment because the Bible says any day. And when you're a little kid, and they tell you the Bible says any day, you think it means any day. You don't have the mental capacity to say, wait a minute, it's been 2,000 years. Has it been any day for 2,000 years? You don't
Yeah.
realize that till you get some time behind you.
Yeah. So when you're a little kid, you're walking around in a constant panic attack, worrying is that are those clouds splitting before I get my ice cream sandwich or whatever.
Well, we were also told that if you do, even though I was saved, if you do something wrong or you're in the wrong place when Jesus comes back, do you think Jesus is going to come into a movie theater to get you? No, if you're in a movie theater, Jesus is going to leave you there. So that type of thing can traumatize a child. So I think that's why I had a little bit of a PTSD thing going. So I thought either Jesus is going to come back or I'm just going to die. So
And this is totally off subject, but I just feel like I want to say it, and I'm going to say it, and then we can get back on topic. But I love that. I am grateful for my experience in the church because it did grow me to where I am now.
hmm
I'm
hmm
grateful for that. But as I look back and not in judgment, but just observing all of those harsh things that they put on kids, and we wonder where are these drug problems coming from,
hmm
you know? And people say get the drug dealers off the street, but I think if we could shut the mouths of people who incite fear and expect something so huge from our kids, if we just let our kids know you are loved and
yeah.
you are fine just like you are, I think we'd have, that's very simplistic, I know, but I think we'd have a
No,
whole
I think it's huge because
drug.
I was determined that I wasn't going to let my kids grow up in a church like I grew up in. So I remember when I was going to an evangelical church, they did a Sunday school lesson with my daughter Kayla, and they had her make this thing with a sheet of paper. It was black on one side and white on the other side, and they said the white side is God, that's good. The black side is you're bad. And she was
Ah,
probably, I don't know, 7 or 8, I think. First of all, I went to them. I'm like, okay, there's so many things wrong with that. My daughter's African American. So you're telling her being black is a bad thing. The other thing is you're telling my daughter that she's evil. Um, this is not acceptable. So I had to talk with the Sunday school. They realized that they had made a mistake. That's fine. But we left that church not too long after that. Now I started going to a Unity church, totally different message at the Unity church. So it's not all churches that are bad, and then not all religion is bad. And the people that teach these things don't do it to be evil. They don't do it
Right.
they don't know any better.
Right.
It's what
I
they were
agree.
taught, and they're trying to quote unquote save you, and they haven't really thought through why would we need to save ourselves from God? I
Right.
mean, why God was the biggest problem in my life for most of my early life. I was okay with everything else. I was scared of God. So yeah, I think what you said is it's not simplistic, and it's a very important point, because when I say things like, if you want to find God, look within, that's blasphemous, coming from the church that I came from. If you
Yeah.
tell people that people are good by nature, that's blasphemous, because we all have original sin.
Original sin.
And that message of original sin, and being basically hated by God, not basically being hated by God because God can't stand sin, that's a very harmful message. And, people might say, well, I'm okay and I got that message. You may not be as okay as you think you are,
Right.
because you can't truly love yourself if you think your creator doesn't love you.
Well, and not only that, you may think you're okay, but um, who are you judging?
Yeah.
Who are you projecting that fear onto? Because I think that's something else that we do, or that I did. I can only talk from my experience, that I did when I was in
Hmm.
church. I projected my unworthiness onto everybody else
Hmm.
and said they needed Jesus. I
Yeah.
was very judgmental.
Yeah.
Um, but God shut me down.
Well,
He said, "Here, let me show you." Hang on just a second. Let's see if we have any questions. We're getting close to the end of time, y'all. And if y'all do have any other questions, let us know. And in a little bit, Brian's going to let us know how to reach him and what kinds of things that he offers. Simultaneous lives, love it, resonates with me. Trying to learn, get rid of the negative lessons, spirit, including family. Knowledge is powerful. Give people the opportunity. Do you use any forms of spiritual communications, Brian?
again, my spiritual communication is more continuous. I do have some practices. And again, I don't want to keep referring to the book, but I cover in the book some of the things that I do, because these are things that work for me. So one of the things is, I practice gratitude. So before I get out of bed every morning, I have a practice where I say three things that I'm grateful for. And these could be big things. It could be small things. It could be, I'm going out to dinner tonight. It could be, I'm glad that my bed is warm. It could be, I'm grateful that I have the ability to walk. But I try to start my day off with gratitude, with looking forward, the positive message. Um, I walk every day for an hour and a half. It's about 7 miles. For the first half hour of my walk or so, I walk in silence. So it's kind of a silent meditation. Just trying to stay in the moment, not thinking about the past, not thinking forward to what I have to do during the day. And then I'll listen to a podcast or listen to some uplifting music for the last hour or so of the walk. Um, I read voraciously to try to understand, the afterlife, how the mind works, things of that nature. So, I do those things. I do sit in meditation for 20 minutes to 30 minutes a day. And that's when I'm just trying to, learn to control my mind, to quiet my mind, things of that nature. And I get downloads, I guess I call it. I usually wake up around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'll have these inspired ideas for a podcast or for an article or for something like that. So I think that's a form of spirit communication. And again, a lot of these things are really subtle, and I think everybody has them, and they don't really realize where they're coming from.
I agree with that. Yes.
So yeah, those are things I do. Like I said, the things for me, like the facilitated after death communications, I took Craig Hogan's thing. He's got something online that's free that people can do. They don't really work that well for me, but like I said, what I'm hearing from Shayna is you don't need that, because we're in constant communication,
Right.
and we're basically like one, so when I'm doing like these podcasts and stuff, I have two monitors in my office, and on this monitor, when I'm not working, it's a picture of my three girls, my wife and my two girls. and Shayna's there in the middle. So I always feel like she's right here with me.
Right.
And when I talk to mediums or I walk in a room where there's an intuitive person, they'll say, "Who's that girl with you?" Like she's always with you. So this happened to me many times. So I just feel like, she's always with me,
Right.
and all I have to do is, she's always just a thought away.
Have you taken a mediumship class, or are you just feeling your way into knowing how to communicate with her and understanding what it is you're getting from
I've
her?
done a little mediumship development, and it's interesting. I work with Dr. Gary Schwartz, and he says he's the Helen Keller of the of the spirit world. He's like, I can't see spirit, I can't hear spirit. I kind of feel that way, but I've taken some development. And I have had some hits, So I think I know I have some intuition. It's really weird. I get little weird things, small things. I was telling my wife this yesterday. I woke up a couple days ago, and I had a dream about miniature watermelons. They were like the size of baseballs or softballs. I'm
Uh,
like, "There's no such thing as a miniature watermelon. Why did I have that dream?" The next day, I went to the grocery store, and they had miniature watermelons. Now they were the size of like a volleyball, but just little things like that will happen to me.
right.
And so, and again, it's just kind of being aware of it. One time I had a dream. Uh, I was driving a pickup truck, which I don't drive. I knocked over my mailbox and I put it in the back of my truck and I drove around with it all day. Totally random, weird dream. But the next day I was on my walk and there was a mailbox that was knocked over, just like the mailbox had been in my dream. So I do have things like that happen, pretty
Yeah.
often.
Yeah, that's neat. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions. Um, what they're just commenting, if we're made in the image of God, then it only makes sense that we should look within. The Catholics did that too. Fear and shame in churches. Yeah.
Hmm.
Love is key. I send love and ease to all hearts. I wasn't able to find God in organized religion. Um, have you ever tried spirit community? Okay, we got that. Wait, with spirit boxes, tarot, or meditation?
Yeah,
You said that pretty
I,
much.
I I haven't. I know my wife. She has used a pendulum, so I think that works for her. I think whatever works for you. There's different modalities. I mean, you talked about. I know you do tarot,
Yeah,
and people do tarot in different ways, and some people use tarot as a way of connecting with spirit. Um, for me, my practice is more contemplative. I guess it's more of the meditation.
right,
It's more practicing gratitude. I don't feel like I'm clairvoyant or clairaudient or any of those clairs necessarily. I do get, like I said, I get intuitions. And sometimes, I wonder if I don't get some of the communications other people do because of the work that I do. Because if I did and I said, "Oh, I saw Shayna," she appeared to me, then people would say, "Well, my child's never appeared to me. So you're somebody special, or you've got something that I don't have."
right.
Um, and I don't know. I think that my belief is we get what we need. So
Yes,
I'm happy for those people that have, and I do know people that have like literally seen their loved ones like sitting. I have a client that I work with, and she saw her son sitting in a chair, in her house. I haven't had anything like that, and that's okay. I've got confidence that Shayna's with me, and I'll see her again.
right, right. I could talk for hours right now because I'm thinking, yeah, my sister was just telling me that she remembered getting up out of her body and going sit on the sofa with my grandmother who had been deceased for about 10 years by that time
Hmm.
and have
Wow. Yeah.
a conversation. I'm like, that never happens to me. I
Yeah.
don't know
Well,
that.
it's really easy to be jealous what other people get, but as I said, my thing is I think we get what we need.
Yeah,
And it's really interesting because I've had people that have had amazing communications and they'll say, "I don't get dreams." And it's like, well, but you saw your loved one or you got a text from them. I mean, literally these things happen. And we all want what we don't have is really what it comes down
right,
to.
right,
So, dreams are the most common way our loved ones come to us because our defenses are down and we're in that hypnagogic state where we're kind of between being awake and being asleep and they can get to us. Because I think one of the keys to spirit communication is getting out of your own way. And I'm a very analytical person with a mind that just runs 100 miles an hour. So it's really
right.
hard for them to get through to me, in that way. But just what I would say to the people that are listening, try to be um, grateful for what you do get and try to be aware of what you get and understand that your loved one might communicate in a way that maybe you don't think is the right way, but they're communicating.
Right.
So if you're getting flashing lights in your house, maybe they're really good with flashing lights, and maybe they're not so good with dream visits. And if you're getting feathers, don't ask for dimes. You know, take what you get and acknowledge it, and then you'll get more. It's funny because the other day I was out walking, and I thought, I haven't seen a feather in it's been a couple of months. And I thought, do I not get feathers in the winter? I mean, they're birds in the winter. Why I haven't seen a feather?
Right.
It was next day or the day after I was walking, and a feather like flew down in front of my face and landed about 5 feet from me. Um, so sometimes it's just a matter of like, I
Ask
haven't seen that in a while. Yeah.
remind me that you're there. Yeah. Okay. So I don't think I'm seeing any more questions. So go ahead and it is 7 o'clock. So we're an hour. So take a few minutes and let us know how to reach you. What kind of services do you offer? Tell us how to get the book, all that stuff.
Okay. You can reach me at my website, which is www.grieftogrowth.com. That's grief, the numeral two, as you said, growth.com. Or you can text the word growth to 31996, and I'll send you some text to kind of tell you how to get in touch with me. The book, I'll show it for people that can see. Well, it's green, so it's on my green screen. You won't be able to see it. But it's Grief to Growth, Planet Not Buried, How to Survive and Thrive After Life's Greatest Challenges. It's available on Amazon in both paperback and audio format. In terms of the services I offer, I am a life coach. So I do help people with just general life issues, whether that's social, financial, spiritual, physical health, all those typical types of life coach things. I am a grief partner. I work with people that are going through grief. A lot of my clients are people are parents, but that'd be someone that lost a child necessarily. And I'm also a small business consultant. I do run a small business. And you can reach all that through grieftogrowth.com.
Okay.
And you can email me through there or Brian at Grief to Growth.
Okay, great. Guys, thank y'all so much for showing up tonight. And Brian, I am so honored to have had you here. And thank you for the work that you do. I think it's so very, very important. I think it's important for us to be able to have that hope, to know that we don't really die, that there's no such real thing as that. So, and you're getting that message out there, and I appreciate that.
Well,
Go ahead.
thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you, and an honor to be here with you and your listeners. I hope it helps somebody.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure you have. Okay. And thank you again. Have a super day, and come back and see us. I might call you to come back and see us.
Sounds great.
Okay. Have a
All right.
great.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.